Hello everyone, and thank you for watching my presentation. I did my field study at the McKeldin Library, and my job was updating and creating authority records. The McKeldin Library is a NACO member, and that stands for Name Authority Cooperative Program. It's part of the Program for Cooperative Cataloging, or PCC for short, in which member libraries contribute bibliographic records and authority records under a common set of standards. There are 4 PCC programs: BibCo, SACO, CONSER, and NACO, which does name authority records and which is the main emphasis of this study. I'll start with a bit of background information. The University of Maryland publishes an ebook series called the Romantic Circles Praxis Series, which are scholarly works, as you might have gathered, devoted to the study of Romanticism. It has published about 65 volumes so far, and until this past year, very few of these ebooks had ever been cataloged. The field study emerged as a project to give these names up-to-date authority records. The contributors I focused on most were editors, but I also occasionally did work for contributing authors and interviewees. Some contributors had no authority records. Mostly I updated AACR2 records to RDA. Now this is very technical, and I think that I should go over at least the basics of name authorities. Authority work is the process of organizing bibliographic information using a single distinct identifier, or heading as catalogers call it. There are several types of authority control: title, subject, and name authorities. The headings for authority records must be consistent, but also unique, the point being to keep each name, subject, and title distinct from each other. Controlled vocabulary is a vital part of authority work. When applied to names, the form and spelling of the name most commonly used or preferred is called an authorized access point. To illustrate this, I've given a couple of examples. If you look up Madonna in a library catalog, without authorized access points, the catalog would have no means of knowing if you meant the pop star or Mary the Mother of Jesus. Authorized access points allow you to specify that. In this case, the pop star's authorized access point is Madonna 1958-2, while the Virgin Mary's is Mary, Blessed Virgin, Saint. In this way, books about these two figures won't be confused in the library catalog, and this eases a researcher's task of locating library materials. In another example, what about authors who wrote under multiple names, like Mark Twain? In this case, the catalog links all of them to a single authorized access point, choosing the name the author most commonly was known by, as well as other distinctive information, such as birth or death dates. Mark Twain's authorized access point is therefore Twain Mark, 1835 through 1910. His real name and his other pseudonyms are all listed in his authority record as variant names, so all of his works in the library catalog will be correctly attributed to him, regardless of what name he used. In other words, name authority work is entirely to ensure that the works in a library's holdings are attributed to the right people, which in its turn makes it much easier for researchers and library users to use the catalog and find the information they need to locate materials. Now, in addition to these basic principles of authority work, the advent of RDA has introduced a new linked data element to authority control. Under AACR2, the previous standard, the information in authority records was written as text strings. RDA adds additional information to the authority record, and also inputs that information as data rather than as text strings. This is still a developing project, but its purpose is to create a database, found on id.loc.gov, of authority records that can be used for linked data. My job was to create new authority records for agents that did not previously have any, or to update AACR2 records to RDA, which involved typing a lot of data into the old authority records and setting them to RDA rules. To do this, I primarily used OCLC Connection Client, which is shown in the picture. I also used RDA Toolkit, where all the rules for RDA can be found, resources in Cataloger's Desktop, and to a limited degree, Maxwell's Handbook for RDA, if I needed further explanation for an RDA rule. There were several other resources I occasionally used too, if I needed a subject term, for instance, but these were the primary tools. The first step with any name, of course, was to determine whether or not it had an authority record. The easiest way to do this was to look at bibliographic records for works the contributor was involved in. If their Mark 700 field had a controlled heading, that meant they had an authority record, which I could simply link to. If the heading was not controlled, I had to go to OCLC's database of authority records, which mostly has the same information as LC's, incidentally, and sometimes involved sorting through similar names, such as in the case of Robert Miles. How many people in the world do you think are named Robert Miles? So you would have to go through them and determine if any of them was the person you're looking for. Once an authority record had been found, I had to determine if it was AACR2 or RDA. This actually is one of the easiest parts of the process. AACR2 records are typically much shorter than RDA records, but the most surefire way of knowing is by looking at the rules fixed field, which I've indicated with a red arrow in that picture. And if the rules fixed field shows a C, it is AACR2. If it's a Z, it's RDA. As part of the procedure, I also put together a spreadsheet with all the names from the Romantic Circles Praxis series that I would be looking at. This way, I was able to determine if the contributors of this series had authority records, and if they did, whether they were in AACR2 or RDA. There were a total of 105 names in this spreadsheet, but we were able to ignore 52 that were already RDA. From there, I was able to work methodically, going through this list and updating or creating authority records as needed. I'll now talk more about the institution itself. As you all hopefully know, the McKeldin Library is UMD's main research library. The field study was in Collection Services, whose mission statement reads, Collection Services acquires, describes, provides access to, maintains, and enhances the discovery of quality collections to support the research and teaching goals of the University of Maryland. Collection Services has 4 departments: Acquisitions and Data Services, Continuing Resources and Database Management, Discovery and Metadata Services, and Original and Special Collections Cataloging. This field study overlapped 2 of these 3 departments, Original and Special Collections Cataloging and Continuing Resources and Database Management. This is because I primarily worked with 2 faculty members from different departments. Most Collection Services employees work in a large office at the 2nd floor of the McKeldin Library, and I did too. I worked in a corner of this floor where mostly librarians from Metadata Services and Original Cataloging work. Now, the 2 faculty members I worked with were Beth Gay, who was my supervisor and who specializes in serials cataloging, and Kathy Glennon, who was the head of the Original and Special Collections Cataloging Department. Beth took charge of training me in authority work, and we organized the work into 5 steps. Step 1, I would update or create a name authority record. Step 2, Beth would review the record and send it back to me to fix any mistakes. Step 3, I would fix those mistakes and Beth would review it again. Step 4, if she thought it looked fine, we would then send it to Kathy for approval. Now, Kathy is also the chair of the RDA Steering Committee, and was greatly involved in the development of RDA. She therefore is an expert on both RDA standard descriptive cataloging as well as authority work. And so step 5, if Kathy approved the record for contribution, then Beth would upload it to the OCLC database, and ultimately it would end up on the Library of Congress database. I should explain that Beth did this part because I did not have the correct permissions to do it myself. Collection Services' mission statement indicates that they are very dedicated to acquisitions, access, and discovery. That being said, while I learned a lot during this field study, and did a lot, I can't say my experience working in this field for this particular institution really was very satisfying. I only ever really interacted with Beth and with Kathy for this field study, although I know some of the other members of Metadata Services and Original Cataloging by sight, and from what I've observed, and from some hearsay, it has been made clear to me that Collection Services prioritizes e-resources and acquisitions, but not cataloging and metadata. Some of the staff also advised me that for the past couple of decades, Collection Services has consistently not replaced catalogers and metadata librarians after they leave. This is actually visibly obvious from the number of empty cubicles in the Metadata Services and Original Cataloging, particularly when contrasted with those of more acquisitions-oriented departments like Continuing Resources. What this all adds up to is that Collection Services at the University of Maryland simply does not value cataloging as much as other libraries might. With that in consideration, in the unlikely event that UMD were to offer me a permanent position in a cataloging or a metadata field, I would most likely not accept it, as I do not believe that McKeldin Library's collection services is a workplace conducive to anyone seeking a career in cataloging. Now, I do not necessarily mean to disparage or complain about the way collection services is run, and given their focus, they do a very meticulous job running databases and acquisitions matters. I think that their emphasis on e-resources and the fact that Romantic Circles is a UMD publication also helped them understand the importance of getting these ebooks into WorldCat, which UMD uses as its main catalog. That being said, I discovered only a couple of days ago that WorldCat does not integrate authority records, and this in fact floored me. This left me uncertain what use my entire field study had been for UMD and for the public as a whole. I have, however, come to the conclusion that even if UMD Libraries makes little use of my work in the field study, these updated and newly created records will appear in the Library of Congress's database, and therefore may ultimately be useful to the library world as a whole. Aside from all this, one difficulty I had was with pacing. This was also in part a workplace culture issue, because of the differences between how different parts of library infrastructure operate. Before starting this study, I had been working more from an acquisitions perspective, and something my supervisor later observed is that acquisitions librarians tend to be far more quick-paced than catalogers, and I carried that over into my work. Catalogers need to be very meticulous, and therefore often have to take their time, but I was trying to get as many records done as I possibly could for the first couple of months. My supervisor repeatedly told me to slow down, and it wasn't an easy adjustment at first, but I understand why she said that, because I was really just bumping into walls the whole time. And it was actually slowing down the work a bit. But I think that in the past few weeks I've gotten more used to it. I have already discussed in great detail why authority work is so important to library work. I should stress that cataloging is the invisible backbone to any functional library. If the catalog isn't working, then users will have a much more difficult time locating library materials. Therefore, if a catalog isn't working well, and this of course includes the function of authority records, then the library potentially could be rendered useless. A well-maintained catalog, with the proper controlled vocabulary and the proper authorized access point, is vital. So I hope that, if nothing else, your takeaway from this will be that catalogers and metadata librarians should not be undervalued or overlooked. And that's about it. If there are any questions, feel free to comment in the presentation's discussion. You also can find out more about this project at the resources I have listed in this slide. Thank you very much.